rejected Omega fought off a rogue to protect a cub. The Alpha King saw everything. The forest was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. The snow lay thick on the branches of frozen pines, bending them under its weight. A pale mist clung to the ground, curling around the trunks like ghostly fingers. The wind whispered secrets of a kingdom far to the south, a land of kings and crowns, where power was law and mercy was rare. In this cursed edge of the world, a single figure moved silently, a shadow among shadows. Kalen was small, lean, and cautious. His clothes were tattered and patched, a mix of leathers and furs scavenged from wolves and wandering hunters. His hair was the color of midnight, and his eyes, sharp and alert, reflected the faint moonlight that struggled through the forest. He was an Omega, a rejected one, marked by the whispers of the kingdom as dangerous, weak, or cursed. People said he carried a bloodline that would bring misfortune, that his magic was unstable. So he lived in the fringes, avoiding villages, hunters, and worse, the cold judgment of those who ruled with claws. Yet Kalen did not fear the cold. He feared failure. Tonight his task was simple but dangerous: hunt for food, keep himself alive, and stay unseen. But the forest had other plans. A distant scream tore through the night. It was high-pitched, fragile, and filled with terror. Kalen froze. His ears twitched. The sound was not human. It was a cub, a wolf cub. He did not think. He ran. Through thick snow, over frozen roots, he moved with the grace of one who had learned to vanish in the night. He followed the cries until he found the source, a small clearing half buried in snow. There, a rogue creature loomed over a trembling cub. Its fur was black as coal, eyes burning red. Its claws dug into the snow. Its teeth were sharp, cruel, unnatural. Kalen's stomach clenched. He recognized the magic. Rogue wolves were not merely animals. They were cursed, twisted by old spells. Hungry for power and life they could not create. The cub was small, no more than a season old, with fur soft as clouds and eyes that shimmered with innocence. Kalen's heart ached. He could not leave it here. "Back!" he shouted, though his voice was small against the roar of the wind. The rogue did not listen. It turned toward him, hissing, smoke curling from its nostrils. Its magic was dangerous, dark, and familiar. Kalen had felt the pull before, in the nights he spent alone, learning the craft of survival and hidden spells whispered in the shadows of his past. He braced himself. His hands moved instinctively, shaping the air, whispering words his tongue barely understood. A pulse of silver light erupted from his palms, striking the rogue. It yelped and recoiled, but only for a moment. Kalen's heart pounded. He had to protect the cub, but this was more than a fight. It was a test, not of strength, but of will. The rogue lunged again, and Kalen rolled, narrowly avoiding a swipe that could have ended him. Snow sprayed around them, glittering like shards of broken glass. "You will not take it," Kalen said, his voice stronger now. He focused, drawing from the deep well of magic that had been his curse and his companion for as long as he could remember. The rogue faltered as Kalen's light coiled around it, binding it to the snow, forcing it to retreat. But the fight was far from over. The rogue twisted and vanished into the mist, leaving only footprints and the faint echo of growls. Kalen's chest heaved. He turned to the cub, who now stared at him with wide, trusting eyes. "It's okay," he whispered. "You're safe now." The cub hesitated, sniffing the air, then slowly crept toward him. Kalen lowered his hand and allowed the little creature to press against his chest. Its warmth seeped into him, thawing the frost in his heart, if only a little. From the shadows, someone watched. Kalen did not notice at first, too absorbed in the fragile life he had just saved. But a pair of golden eyes, sharp and commanding, glimmered in the distance. Corvian, the Alpha King of the Southern Kingdom, stood at the edge of the clearing. Even in the dark, his presence was undeniable. Tall, imposing, with a strength that demanded obedience and a gaze that could pierce through steel and snow alike. He did not move, did not speak. He simply watched, and what he saw unsettled him. Kalen fought not just for survival, but for love, for protection, for life itself. And he had won, without asking for permission, without bending to the rules of kings or fate. Corvian's chest tightened. This Omega, small and rejected, had done what many of his strongest warriors could not. Kalen, unaware of his observer, lifted the cub into his arms and began to move through the snow. Every step was a struggle. The forest was relentless, and his own injuries from the fight burned sharply, but he could not stop. Not yet. Hours passed. Kalen kept the cub close, whispering lullabies he barely remembered from childhood. The rogue had not returned, but the sense of danger lingered, like smoke in the air after a fire. He found a hollowed tree to rest in, walls of ice and wood shielding him from the wind. The cub curled against him, small and trusting, and Kalen allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He did not know who would come next, villagers, hunters, or something worse, and he did not yet know that Corvian had moved silently through the forest, unseen, tracking him with patience and precision that few could match. When Kalen finally drifted into a restless sleep, the Alpha King was closer than he realized. He knelt at the edge of the clearing, golden eyes studying the Omega. Corvian's lips pressed into a thin line. He had seen courage. He had seen desperation. He had seen something he had not expected. Purity. But Corvian also saw danger. That rogue was only the beginning. The cub's bloodline carried old magic, dangerous and forbidden. And Kalen, Kalen, was a wild, unpredictable force. For the first time in many years, the Alpha King felt an unfamiliar stirring, a combination of admiration and unease. Something told him that the Omega before him would change everything he knew about power, about control, about himself. The snow fell silently, covering tracks and footprints, hiding the world from itself. And yet the forest seemed to hum with tension, as if aware that the first move in a long, dangerous game had already been made. Kalen slept, weary and wounded, unaware of the watchful eyes that followed him. He dreamed of flames and shadows, of voices calling his name, and the small cub laughing in the safety of his arms. The dreams were sweet, yet there was always a warning beneath them. A shadow, a claw, a darkness he could not shake. Morning came slow, with pale sunlight filtered through ice and mist. Kalen awoke, the cub still nestled against him, and felt a small measure of hope. He could survive this. He had survived worse. And yet, when he stepped out into the clearing, ready to continue his journey, he found a small piece of obsidian in the snow, etched with runes he did not recognize. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with a rhythm that matched his own heartbeat. "You cannot hide from the blood you bear," he read aloud, his voice trembling slightly. The wind carried the words away, but the fear, the thrill, the warning remained. Somewhere, in the frozen shadows, golden eyes watched, and Kalen did not yet know that the Alpha King had seen everything. The fight, the courage, the heart. Nor did he know that his life, his choices, and the cub's fate were now tangled with a power far greater than his own. The forest held its breath, and the story had only just begun. The walls of the Alpha Palace rose like dark cliffs against the sky, black stone polished to a cruel shine. Torches flickered along the battlements, throwing dancing shadows across towers and courtyards. Inside, the air was warm but heavy, scented with incense and iron. This was the heart of the kingdom, where kings and queens ruled with unyielding authority, where every word could shift power, and every glance carried judgment. Kalen had never imagined he would step inside such a place. And yet here he was, bound lightly in enchanted chains that only held his magic, not his body. He walked between guards who regarded him with suspicion, whispers curling around him like smoke. Every step echoed in the marble hall, a reminder that he was no longer in the forest. He was in a world that had always rejected him, a world that now demanded he answer for his life, and for the life of the cub he had protected. At the far end of the hall, a throne loomed, carved of obsidian and ivory, adorned with symbols older than memory, and sitting upon it was Corvian, Alpha King, the man who had watched Kaelin in the forest with golden, unreadable eyes. He did not speak. He merely observed. Kaelin's pulse quickened, though he tried to hide it. The air between them was sharp, like steel on stone. Corvian's gaze was both warning and invitation. It unsettled him. It called to something he had long buried. "Step forward," Corvian said, his voice deep, commanding yet smooth. It carried the weight of authority and an unspoken challenge. Kaelin obeyed, though every instinct in him screamed to run. "You fought well in the forest," Corvian continued, leaning slightly forward, "against a rogue that even my hunters would fear. That takes courage and recklessness."
Kaelin swallowed.
"I did what I had to do," he said quietly, though his voice carried more defiance than he expected. The cub was in danger.
"I couldn't leave it." Corvian's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with curiosity. "You act without fear of consequences. Most would flee. Most would let the cub die." He paused, studying Kaelin's face.
"Bait me!"
"Why?" Kaelin looked down at his hands, still aching from the fight, still faintly glowing with the residue of his magic. Because I can't leave someone helpless behind," he said, "even if it's not my place." Corvian leaned back, the shadow of a smile flickering at the corner of his mouth. "Interesting," he murmured. "An Omega who protects, who survives, and who defies expectations." He wanted to speak, to explain that he was nothing special, just a survivor, but Corvian's gaze stopped him. There was no judgment here, only focus and attention, and that was more dangerous than any enemy in the forest.
"You are bound by blood and magic," Corvian said slowly, rising from the throne.
"I cannot ignore what you did, but nor can I allow you to act freely. The cub is important, and you may have drawn danger upon yourself by protecting it." Kaelin's eyes flicked toward the chains. "I'm not a prisoner," he said sharply. "I won't be treated like one." Corvian regarded him without a word. Slowly, deliberately, he walked down the steps of the throne, each movement controlled, powerful. Kaelin's heart beat faster. Every step Corvian took seemed to shrink the distance between them, yet also build a wall of authority that Kaelin had no desire to cross. "You will stay here," Corvian said finally. "Under my protection and my observation. You may eat, rest, and recover, but you will not leave." "Not yet." Kaelin wanted to argue, but the weight of the palace, of the law, and of Corvian's presence silenced him. He followed the guards to a small chamber near the eastern wing. It was simple but elegant, with a bed, a fireplace, and a window that looked out over the icy gardens. For the first time in a long while, Kaelin felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The cub was already here, placed safely on a soft blanket. It whimpered and crawled into Kaelin's lap, trusting him as it had in the forest. Kaelin stroked its fur, his hands trembling slightly. The moment should have brought comfort, yet it only reminded him of the danger that still lurked beyond these walls. As night fell, Kaelin sat by the window, staring at the frozen moon reflecting on the palace's spires. He could feel Corvian's gaze even without seeing him. It was heavy, unrelenting, like the weight of the kingdom itself. And Kaelin, despite himself, felt drawn to it. The door opened without sound. Corvian entered, silent as a shadow, and stood just behind Kaelin. "You should rest," Corvian said, his voice softer now, yet still commanding. "You will need strength for what is coming." "Why do you care?" he asked quietly. Corvian's eyes softened, just slightly, the golden light flickering in the torchlight. "Because the forest does not choose who survives, Kaelin. And I am not the forest." I can see potential where others see danger. And
I am not blind.
he wanted to look up, wanted to challenge, wanted to flee from the heat of those words. But there was a strange pull he could not resist, like being drawn to a flame he knew could burn him.
You are cautious, Corvian continued. Careful. Yet, you are also reckless in the ways that matter. You risk your life for those who cannot protect themselves.
You risk your freedom for others.
That is why you survive, and why you irritate me. Kylan's hands tightened on the cub.
I'm not here to irritate anyone, he whispered. No, Corvian said, leaning closer, so close that Kaelin could feel the faint warmth radiating from him. You are here to challenge me, without even trying. Kaelin finally dared to look up. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the weight of power, desire, and danger collided. Corvian's presence was overwhelming, commanding, yet there was a softness beneath it, a vulnerability that made Kaelin's heart hammer. The silence stretched, filled only by the crackle of the fireplace and the low breathing of the cub. Then, Corvian spoke again.
The rogue you fought in the forest, it was no ordinary creature. Its magic was tied to the cub's bloodline.
You may have saved it, but danger is far from over. Kaelin's stomach sank. Then what do you want from me? Corvian's expression did not soften, but his eyes lingered on Kaelin longer than necessary. I want you to survive. I want the cub to survive. And I want to understand why you care so deeply for a life that is not your own. Kaelin did not answer. There was no easy explanation. He did care fiercely, because he knew what it was to be powerless, rejected, and alone. He cared because this small life was a chance to protect something pure in a world so cruel. And he cared because in some strange, inexplicable way, it connected him to the golden eyes watching him, to the Alpha King who could crush him with a single command, but instead chose to observe, to challenge, and perhaps to understand. Days passed, yet Kaelin remained in his chamber, healing, studying, and protecting the cub. Corvian visited often, sometimes silent, sometimes speaking in low, controlled tones about threats, about the palace, about the kingdom. Every visit carried tension, like a wire pulled tight. Kaelin never knew if he should feel fear, admiration, or something he dared not name. One evening, as snow fell silently outside, Corvian entered the chamber holding a small, intricately carved box. He placed it before Kaelin.
Open it,
he said. Inside were runes, glowing faintly, similar to the ones Kaelin had found in the forest, but these were clearer, safer, meant to teach rather than threaten. They were instructions, guidance, protection spells. Corvian's hand brushed Kaelin's as he closed the box. It was a fleeting touch, yet it set Kaelin's chest aflame. Use this, Corvian said. Learn. Protect. Survive. Kaelin met his gaze, seeing the unspoken words, the challenge, the warning, and perhaps care. Before Corvian left, he whispered, almost to himself, "You are dangerous, Kaelin. Not because of your magic, but because of your heart. And hearts like yours change everything." Kaelin could only stare after him, the cub nestled in his lap, and wonder what the Alpha King truly saw in him. Courage? Madness? Or something else entirely, something neither of them could name yet. And then, as night fell, a shadow moved outside the window. Kaelin stiffened. The rogue threat was not gone. The kingdom's shadows were long, and the forest's whispers still lingered. He knew, deep in his chest, that his survival, the cub's safety, and his fate were now bound together with the golden eyes that watched him, and the man who ruled them all. The game had only begun. The wind tore through the palace gardens like a living thing, rattling the frozen branches and sweeping snow across the marble paths. Kaelin stood at the edge of the terrace, The cub pressed against him, staring at the distant forest where the rogue had vanished. The memory of red eyes and sharp teeth haunted him. It was not gone. Danger never left completely. It only waited. Corvian appeared beside him without a sound, as though he had been part of the wind itself. The Alpha King's presence was magnetic, commanding the space around him. He looked down at Kalen, and for a moment, the cold, calculated ruler vanished, replaced by a man who had seen too much, carried too much, and now stood at the edge of something he could not control.
"You worry too much," Corvian said, his voice low, almost a rumble.
The rogue may have fled, but its kind never forget. Neither does the curse it carries.
Kalen's hands tightened on the cub. "I'm not afraid," he said, though his voice carried the tremor of exhaustion and fear.
I've faced worse than a rogue wolf. Corvian's golden eyes flickered, sharp and unreadable.
"Perhaps," he said, "but this is not just a wolf. It is a shadow of old magic, tied to the cub's bloodline. You may have fought it once, but it will return, and it will not fight alone."
Kalen swallowed.
He had learned survival in the wilderness, had mastered the small, secret magic he carried, but this was something far beyond him. And yet, in the gaze of Corvian, he felt something strange. A challenge, an invitation, and a trust he could not earn easily.
"You will come with me," Corvian said suddenly. "We leave the palace."
Tonight, Colin's brow furrowed. "Leave?"
But the rogue is clever, Corvian interrupted. But it underestimates you.
And it will underestimate us. Together. Kalen hesitated. He had lived his life avoiding kings, avoiding hunters, avoiding power. Yet he knew Corvian's presence was no mere command. It was a protection, a challenge, and perhaps something more. He nodded, understanding that this was no longer a choice. Night fell, swallowing the palace in shadows. Kalen followed Corvian through secret passages he had never known existed, corridors carved into the heart of the stone, lit by torches that flickered like dying stars. They emerged at the edge of the forest, the trees rising like frozen sentinels, their branches creaking under the weight of snow. Corvian stopped. "You must trust me," he said, his eyes meeting Kalen's. "We cannot fight as one if you doubt me." Kalen nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I trust you," he whispered. It was a dangerous thing to say, more dangerous than facing the rogue itself. But it felt true. The forest was alive with whispers and shadows. Every step was a risk. The rogue was out there, waiting, watching, and its magic tainted the air. Kalen could feel it prickling against his skin, testing him, daring him to fail. They walked deeper. Corvian leading, his presence like a shield, his senses sharp and alert. The cub pressed against Kalen's chest, quivering with fear and trust. Kalen murmured to it, offering comfort, but his own heart raced with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Then they saw it, a figure moving between the trees, sleek and black, eyes glowing red in the moonlight. The rogue had returned. Kalen stepped forward instinctively, magic humming along his fingertips. Corvian placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and grounding.
"Wait," he said. "We do this together," the rogue hissed, circling them, its movements fluid, predatory. Snow flew as it leapt and landed with impossible speed. Kalen's magic flared instinctively, a silver light wrapping around the rogue, forcing it back. But it was relentless, twisting and spinning each attack sharper, faster than the last. Corvian moved like a storm. He did not merely fight. He commanded the air around him, drawing strength from every step, every motion. His presence was overwhelming, a combination of raw power and precision. He struck the rogue with a force that sent it staggering, giving Kalen the opening to release a pulse of magic that bound it to the snow. The rogue yelped, twisted,
and vanished into the mist once more, leaving only the echo of growls. Kalen fell to his knees, exhausted, his chest heaving, while the cub crawled to him, nuzzling his neck.
You did well,
Corvian said, his voice soft but firm. He knelt beside Kalen, close enough that their shoulders touched. But it will return, and when it does, we must be ready. Kalen looked up at him, noticing for the first time the lines of fatigue under Corvian's eyes, the shadows of worry he rarely showed.
You care, Kalen said quietly. Corvian's gaze did not waver. I care, he admitted, not for the kingdom, not for the law, for you.
And for the cub. And perhaps more than I should. He did not know what to say. He had been rejected, feared, and abandoned all his life. Yet here was a man who could have crushed him in an instant, offering not harm, but acknowledgement. Something dangerous and intoxicating stirred inside him. They spent the night in the forest, watching the shadows, repairing what little magic Kalen could summon, and planning their next move. Words were few, but their silence carried a weight, a tension that neither dared break too soon. By dawn, snow had fallen thicker, turning the forest into a white expanse of silence. Kalen and Corvian stood at the edge of a frozen river, the rogue nowhere in sight, yet the sense of menace hung in the air like a storm cloud. You must learn to trust your power, Corvian said, his voice soft.
You were born with it, Kalen. Not everyone can wield it.
Few survive its weight.
I'm not ready, he admitted. I've never been. You will be, Corvian said, placing a hand on Kalen's shoulder.
And when the rogue returns, you will need every ounce of it. But you will not face it alone.
For a moment, Kalen met Corvian's eyes and saw something that made his breath catch, a flicker of vulnerability beneath the mask of the Alpha King, something that mirrored his own fear, his own desire to protect, his own longing for acceptance. The rogue appeared again before they reached the other side of the forest, emerging from the mist like a shadow made of smoke and ice. Its eyes burned with hatred, its magic seeping into the snow, freezing the ground around it. Kalen felt the pulse against his chest, the pull of danger, the thrill of survival. Corvian moved first, striking with controlled precision, breaking the rogue's rhythm. Kalen followed, unleashing a surge of magic that bound it, forcing it to stagger. Together they worked as one, two forces, equal in resolve, different in power, yet linked by trust and something neither dared name. The rogue fell back, yelping and retreating, its magic dissipating into the night. Kalen fell to the snow, exhausted, his magic spent. Corvian knelt beside him, his hand brushing Kalen's cheek, warm and grounding. You are stronger than you realize, Corvian said. Not because of magic, but because of your heart. That is what makes you dangerous.
And necessary.
Kalen's chest tightened. And if I fail? Corvian's gaze held him, unwavering golden eyes shining even in the dim moonlight. Then we rise together.
You are not alone, Kalen. Not anymore.
The cub stirred between them, nuzzling Kalen's chest, a reminder of why they fought, why they survived. Kalen stroked its fur, feeling the warmth spread through him, mingling with the fire that had started between him and Corvian. They spent the rest of the night in the frozen forest, preparing, planning, and understanding that their survival depended not just on magic or strength, but on trust, courage, and the bond forming between them. Neither spoke of what was growing in their hearts, yet both felt it, a dangerous, beautiful connection, forged in shadow, snow, and the pulse of danger. As dawn broke, the forest glimmered under the pale sun, snow sparkling like scattered diamonds. Kalen stood beside Corvian, the cub pressed safely against him, and realized something profound. They were no longer two individuals facing a rogue. They were a team, a force, a promise, and the rogue would return. But so would they, together. The snow fell softly, covering footprints and traces. Yet the bond between Omega and Alpha burned brighter than any winter storm.
The battle was not over.
The shadows were not gone, but Kalen no longer faced them alone. And somewhere, deep in the forest, the rogue watched, waiting, knowing the real challenge was yet to come. The sky was dark, heavy with clouds, and the wind carried the scent of snow and danger. The forest, once silent, now hummed with a tension that made Kalen's skin prickle. The rogue had returned, more cunning, more vicious than before. Its magic spread like ice through the trees, twisting branches and freezing the earth beneath its steps. Kalen stood at the edge of a frozen clearing, the cub pressed to his chest. Corvian was beside him, calm, powerful, a presence that steadied him even as fear rose in his chest. They had trained, planned, and grown together. Yet this was different. This was not a test of courage. It was survival.
"Stay close," Corvian said, his voice low, controlled, commanding. "It knows us now. It knows your power.
It will try to divide us." He had learned much about magic, about courage, about himself in the days since the rogue first appeared, but he had never faced an enemy like this, one that mirrored the darkness in the world, one that threatened not just life but trust, not just survival but hearts. The rogue emerged from the mist, its eyes burning red, its body coiling with magic. Kalen felt the familiar pull, the chill of its power, the threat that ran deeper than teeth and claws. It lunged. Corvian moved first, a storm of strength and precision. His sword glinted in the faint moonlight, striking with the power of a king and the control of a warrior trained for decades. He did not attack recklessly. Every strike was calculated, every motion a command of the battlefield. Kalen followed, releasing pulses of silver light that wrapped around the rogue, forcing it back. Yet it was not enough. The rogue was clever, faster than anticipated, its magic bending around them, striking not with brute force, but cunning. It aimed to separate them, to turn Kalen's fears against him. Kalen's heart raced. He glanced at Corvian and saw the same determination reflected there. They were not two individuals fighting. They were a unit, a bond stronger than fear, stronger than doubt. And for the first time, Kalen understood something Corvian had tried to teach him without words. Trust is a weapon, and love is armor. The rogue lunged again, faster this time, aiming directly at the cub. Kalen roared, unleashing a surge of magic so powerful that the snow around him cracked and sparkled with light. The rogue staggered, yelping in surprise and pain. Corvian struck at the same moment, a precise, devastating blow that sent it sprawling into the snow. Kalen fell to his knees, exhausted, magic spent. Corvian was beside him in an instant, placing a hand on his shoulder, grounding him, steadying him. The cub nuzzled Kalen, sensing safety in the warmth of their bond. "It's not over," Corvian said, his golden eyes scanning the shadows.
"It will rise again if we let it, but we are ready."
Together. Kalen looked up, meeting Corvian's gaze. In those eyes, he saw not just power, but something deeper. Care, admiration, a willingness to risk everything. His chest ached with longing and relief.
"I trust you," he whispered. "And I trust you," Corvian replied.
His voice carried a weight of sincerity that made Kalen's heart thrum. Always. The rogue let out a final, chilling howl and retreated into the forest, melting into the mist. Its magic faded, leaving the clearing quiet, pure, and still. Kalen and Corvian stood together, victorious, yet aware that the battle was as much about hearts as it was about strength. As the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, the frozen forest glimmered like crystals scattered across the world. Kalen pressed the cub to his chest, feeling its warmth, its trust, its life. a life he had fought to protect. Corvian's hand rested lightly on his back, steadying him, connecting him to something he had never known: partnership, equality, care. "You did well," Corvian said softly, almost a whisper, but Kaelin heard every word, not just in battle, but in heart. "You are not just an Omega. You are someone who changes the world, simply by being brave enough to care." Hylane's throat tightened. I
never thought I could matter," he admitted, his voice barely audible.
"I've always been alone, rejected, afraid." Corvian knelt beside him, meeting his gaze. "You are not alone anymore," he said, "and you never will be. Not as long as I stand beside you." The words were heavy, golden, and unyielding. Kaelin's heart raced, and in that moment he understood something he had never allowed himself to hope for. He was seen, truly seen, and cared for, not because of magic, not because of skill, but because of who he was. They returned to the palace slowly, the cub safe in Kaelin's arms, the snow crunching underfoot. The palace gates opened before them, as if sensing the bond between the two, the quiet power of trust, courage, and love. Inside, the halls were bright with torches and the warmth of life, yet Kaelin felt a strange weight, responsibility.
The rogue may be gone, but the kingdom, the cub, and his own heart would always demand vigilance.
Corvian led him to the throne room, now quiet, a place usually filled with ceremony and judgment. The Alpha King stood before the throne, the weight of power etched into every line of his posture. Kaelin stepped forward, carrying the cub, and for the first time he felt equal to the man beside him. Not beneath him, not afraid, but strong in his own right. "You have done more than survive," Corvian said, his voice steady, commanding yet gentle. "You have fought. You have protected. You have loved. And in doing so, you have changed everything."
Kaelin's eyes met Corvian's. "And you?" he asked softly. "What have you learned?" Corvian's golden eye softened. "I have learned that strength is not only in power, but in trust."
That even a king can need someone to stand beside him. That love. Kaelin felt something shift inside him, the last of his fear melting away. He stepped closer, the cub between them, and reached for Corvian's hand. Their fingers brushed, tentative at first, then firm, a silent acknowledgement of the bond forged in shadow, battle, and trust. The cub stirred, nuzzling both of them, and Kaelin laughed softly, a sound that carried relief, hope, and a future he had never imagined. Corvian smiled, the first genuine, unguarded smile Kaelin had ever seen. It was not the smile of a king, but of a man who had found someone to stand beside him, someone to share the weight of both crown and heart. Days passed, and peace settled over the kingdom. The rogue threat had vanished into the distant forests, and the curse that had lingered over the cub's bloodline had begun to fade. Kaelin trained, learned, and grew stronger, his magic no longer a secret to fear but a tool to protect. Corvian remained beside him, guiding, teaching, and sometimes teasing, though always with the unspoken trust that neither of them would betray the other. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Kaelin and Corvian stood atop the palace terrace. The cub played in the snow at their feet, laughing in a way that filled the air with light and warmth. "You have changed everything," Kaelin said, his voice quiet but certain. "Not just the rogue, not just the kingdom, but me." Corvian's eyes held his, golden and unyielding. "And you have changed me," he admitted. "Not by force, not by power, but by heart. I am a king, and yet I am nothing without someone to share it with." Kaelin felt warmth spread through him, a fire in the cold night, a light in the shadows. He took a step closer, and Corvian met him halfway. Together they watched the sun dip below the mountains, the kingdom alive beneath them, and the future stretching wide and uncertain, yet filled with possibility. The robe may have tested them, the curse may have threatened them, and the shadows of the forest may always linger. But Kalen no longer faced them alone. He had survived, he had protected, and he had loved. And Corvian, strong, golden-eyed, commanding, had stood beside him through it all. The cub leaped into Kalen's arms, snowflakes glimmering in its fur, and Kalen laughed, the sound carrying across the terrace, across the kingdom, across the winter itself. The snow fell gently, covering all footprints, hiding the trials they had faced. But the bond between Kalen and Corvian was deeper than snow or shadow, forged in courage, trust, and the quiet, enduring power of love. The Alpha King and the Omega, once separated by fear, legend, and expectation, now stood together, united in heart and purpose, and the kingdom, for the first time in many long years, knew the warmth of hope. The rogue was gone. The curse was breaking, and Kalen, once rejected, once alone, had found his place, not only in the world, but in the heart of the king who had watched him in the forest and never forgotten. Together they faced the rising sun, and the story, though full of shadow, ended in light.